The following recording is a vocal reconstruction of asset MC-MAR-007. The source material was recovered from a primary ship's logbook, found inside a sealed transit crate labeled Navigation Instruments. The crate was part of a lot purchased during the 2025 liquidation of the Marlow Company headquarters. It had been stored in the basement archives, separate from the standard shipping ledgers. While the external port paperwork for this voyage indicates a standard, incident-free transport, the internal private log tells a different story. The Registry does not interpret these records. We simply preserve them.
The philosophy of the log. I've kept logs for most of my working life. 32 years on the water, and you learn that the book is more important than the man. Weather, heading, speed, fuel consumption, engine temperature, oil pressure. You write them the same way every time, so you don't have to think about them later. That's the point. A log is supposed to outlast memory. Memory is a soft thing. It's prone to fog, fear, and fatigue. But ink on a page? That stays hard. This one starts normal. It starts the way 1,000 other mornings started. We departed the harbor at 4:30. Light wind from the northeast, maybe a 3-knot breeze. Low swell, maybe 2 feet, just enough to let you know you were afloat. Visibility was clear all the way to the horizon line. I checked the gyro sync at 5 o'clock. No protest from the machinery. The compass settled onto the heading, like it was coming home to roost. Everything was according to the manifest. I logged calm seas because that's what the instrument said. It's the first entry in the book. It wouldn't be the last time I wrote it that day, but it was the only time I actually believed it. Arthur Marlow came aboard just as the sun was breaking the water. He didn't come with the usual fanfare of a company owner. No suit, no briefcase. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He brought one case. It was wooden, steel-banded, and weighted much heavier than its size suggested. I watched 2 of my strongest deckhands struggle to move it. They didn't carry it, they lugged it, their boots echoing hollowly on the metal gangway. Marlow had it bolted to the deck, in the small cabin directly behind the bridge. He didn't ask about our fuel range. He didn't ask about the crew's experience. He only asked if we were running on the exact scheduled line. I told him we were. He just nodded, his eyes fixed on the crate, and then he went to the rail. For the rest of the morning, he stood there. He watched the water like he was counting the revolutions of a gear, waiting for a tooth to chip. By 9 o'clock, the water started moving in a way I didn't like. It wasn't rough. It wasn't threatening. It was just inconsistent. I've seen storms and I've seen glass, but I've never seen them at the same time. I watched a patch of water 20 yards off the bow that was flat as a mirror, but it was being broken by short, cross-running swells that didn't line up with the wind. They were moving against the grain of the world. I looked at the anemometer. The needle was steady. It showed a 6-knot breeze off the port quarter. But I stepped out onto the bridge wing, and there wasn't a breath of air. The air was thick, hot, and perfectly still. The flags on the masts were dead weight. I looked at the smoke from the galley exhaust. It lifted straight up for 10 feet, then took a sharp 90-degree turn to the left, then dropped toward the deck like it had suddenly turned to lead and hit the water with a hiss I could almost hear over the engines. I called the chief engineer, Miller. I told him the anemometer was fouled. He's a good man, Miller. Practical. He went up the ladder, checked the mounting, checked the wiring, and blew out the sensors. He came back down, wiping grease from his hands, and said it was clean. No corrosion, no bird nesting. He said the instrument was reading the air exactly as it found it. So I didn't argue. I stood there, sweating in a dead calm heat that felt like a furnace, and I watched the needle on the dial tell me there was a cool, refreshing breeze. I logged the instrument reading. I didn't log the sweat. I didn't log the fact that the flags weren't moving. The log doesn't care about my skin. It cares about the sensor. At 11:20, the depth sounder returned a reading that didn't match our charted position. We were supposed to be over the continental shelf, 80 feet of water, sandy bottom. I know these waters. I could sail them blindfolded. But the sounder didn't give me a number, it gave me a delay. I watched the digital readout. The ping would go out and then we'd wait. 4 seconds, 8 seconds, 12 seconds. It wasn't measuring distance to the bottom anymore. It was measuring a gap that shouldn't be there. According to the ping, we were over an abyss that didn't end. I recalibrated the unit. I checked the transducer. Same result. The ocean floor had dropped out from under us, but the surface remained the same flat, dull gray. And then, within the span of a single heartbeat, the readout snapped back to 80 feet. Precisely 80 feet, not 81, not 79. It was as if the bottom had jumped up to meet us and then vanished again. The crew was starting to drift toward the bridge. I could hear them whispering on the deck below. The helmsman, a kid named Davis, complained that the wheel felt heavy. He said it felt like he was steering through wet cement instead of salt water. He had to put his whole weight into a 2-degree correction. I told them to trust the instruments. I pointed to the dials. I showed them that the gyro was steady, the pressure was normal, and the depth was 80 feet. I forced my voice to stay level. The instruments don't lie, Davis, I told him. Feelings lie. Dials don't. By 1400, the barometer rose sharply. It didn't just climb. It jumped. The needle hit the pin on the high side and stayed there. In any other world, pressure like that means clear blue skies and a light heart. But we had none of that. The sky was even, dull, and without any definition. There were no clouds, just a ceiling of gray that seemed to be lowering toward the masts. The sunlight didn't cast shadows. It just diffused, making everything look flat and sickly. Marlow came onto the bridge then. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the crew. He walked straight to the compass. It was vibrating, not spinning, vibrating. It was humming in its housing, a low-frequency buzz that I could feel in the soles of my boots. "Are we slowing down, Captain?" he asked. "The engine RPMs are steady at 120, I said. "Our speed over water is 10 knots. "The water is moving faster than the ship," he replied. He walked to the window and pointed. I looked over the side. The wake, the white water we were throwing behind us, wasn't trailing the hull. It was pulling away from the ship at a 45-degree angle to the starboard. We were heading north, but the sea was moving northeast, taking our wake, our bubbles, and our history with it. "Increase speed," Marlow said. "I'll blow a head gasket if I push her any harder," I told him. "Increase speed," he repeated. He wasn't angry. He was stating a fact of survival. I pushed the throttle forward. The engines groaned a deep, metallic protest that shook the floorboards. But as we hit 15 knots, then 18, the vibration in the compass began to slow. The wake began to straighten. The faster we went, the more the world behaved. It was as if we were on a treadmill, and if we didn't run fast enough, we'd be swept off the back of the map. At sunset, the water went completely still. I've seen calm, but I've never seen dead. No swell, no ripple, no wake at all. The ship cut through the surface like a knife through heavy oil. But the water didn't close up behind us. It stayed open in a long, dark V that stretched back until the gray sky swallowed it. The surface reflected nothing. Not the sky, not the hull, not the running lights. It was like light refused to stay on it. It just sank. Marlow oversaw the transfer personally. A boat appeared out of the dusk. It didn't have lights. It didn't have an engine sound. It just slid out of the fog and bumped against our side. 2 men climbed up. They didn't speak. They didn't have names. They took the wooden case, lowered it into their boat, and vanished back into the gray within 3 minutes. When they were gone, Marlow looked at me. His face looked like it had been carved out of old wood. 30 more minutes on this heading, Captain, he said. Don't turn, don't slow down, just 30 minutes. I didn't ask why. I sat in the chair and I watched the clock. For 30 minutes, we sailed into a void where every instrument reported perfect, idyllic conditions. The compass was true. The barometer was steady. The depth was 80 feet. But outside the window, there was nothing, no stars, no sea. Just the sound of the engine and the feeling that we were the only things left in the universe. At exactly 1912, the radio burst into life. Just a roar of static that made Davis jump. The compass kicked 10 degrees to the left and then swung back. The swell returned with a violent thud that nearly knocked me off my feet. The world felt heavy again. It felt real. I turned the ship around. I didn't look back. By the time we hit the harbor the next morning, the logbook was a masterpiece of boring, professional navigation. I reviewed the entries. 5 o'clock, calm seas. 12 o'clock, calm seas. 18 o'clock, calm seas. Every entry was a lie, and every instrument was a witness. The crew didn't talk on the way in. They didn't look at the water. They just waited for the dock. The instruments didn't lie. They just weren't built to describe what we went through. And that isn't something a log is designed to handle.
The ship returned to port at 8 o'clock the following morning. A post-voyage mechanical inspection was conducted by Marlow Co's engineers. They found no faults in the navigation suite. The anemometer, the compass, and the depth sounder were all found to be in perfect working order, calibrated to within industry tolerances. Despite this, the captain and the entirety of the crew resigned their positions within 48 hours of docking. The captain's private logbook, from which this account was taken, was found inside a crate of decommissioned instruments 5 years later. The instruments themselves were reassigned to a river barge on the Ohio. They never malfunctioned again. The case Arthur Marlow delivered has never been recovered. End of record.